Hey, I'm Lorelei, registered dietitian nutritionist. Welcome to my, well, we're not really in my kitchen today. My kitchen's in the background. This is kind of a different kind of video I wanted to do today because I wanted to talk a little bit about how to become a registered dietitian, how I became a registered dietitian, and the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist. Thanks for joining me. Dietitian, I looked for videos like this to tell me a little bit about the process, about what a dietitian does, so that I could get an idea as to whether it was something I wanted to do, and if so, what the steps would be. So I wanted to just do a little video about how I became a dietitian, and also to tell you a little bit about what a dietitian is. I think a lot of people think of dietitian and nutritionist as synonymous, and they are very related in that a dietitian is a nutritionist, but not all nutritionists are dietitians. So I wanted to kind of just discern the difference there. A dietitian is someone who has gone to school, they have received a degree in nutrition, and then they've also gone on to complete a dietetic internship and then passed a national exam to become a registered dietitian. A nutritionist may have majored in nutrition in school, they may not have, and then they just kind of say that they're a nutritionist. So there's not really an accrediting body or any sort of requirements for that particular title. So although dietitians are nutritionists and that they are experts in nutrition and they can provide nutritional information for people, not all nutritionists have the same background that dietitians have. Dietitians have a scientific background and they are trained not only in like foods and how to eat healthy, but in medical nutrition therapy. You treat people who have, I don't know, diseases or conditions that require nutrition as part of their therapy for their medical condition. For example, if you have type 2 diabetes and you go to your doctor and the doctor diagnoses you with diabetes, you may also see a dietitian who's going to talk to you about dietary modifications that you need to make to be able to continue to live in a healthy way and that your blood sugars are going to be managed through diets. Chronic kidney disease is another medical condition that can be managed by a dietitian as well as a doctor. So dietitians don't diagnose things like diabetes or chronic kidney disease, but they can use nutrition as a medical treatment. And there are a bunch of other situations where a dietitian is needed to treat a medical condition. For example, GI disorders, like an inborn error of metabolism, or some inability to process a specific nutrient, where there are nutritional therapies that are required in order to treat the condition or deal with or manage the symptoms of the condition. So that's kind of the stuff that dietitians are trained to do, whereas nutritionists, I think in general, are more aligned with just providing counseling for people on how to eat better. And that certainly is also something that a dietitian can do. So you might want to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Which is something that I did when I decided I wanted to think about becoming a dietitian or nutritionist. This is actually a second career for me, and there are a lot of dietitians or nutritionists that you might find this is a second career for. They're doing one thing and then they all of a sudden realize they have a great interest in nutrition and they pursue that as perhaps a passion or an additional interest. But there are also definitely people who think they want to be following the nutrition or dietitian path from the time they are quite young. Requirements to become a dietitian are that you have to have a degree in nutrition. Now at this point, that could be a bachelor's degree, so it would be a BS, a bachelor's of science, or you can get an MS, which is a master's of science, which is what I have. I already had a bachelor's degree at the time I decided to pursue my degree in nutrition, so I decided to get a master's as opposed to getting a second bachelor's degree. In 2024, however, it will be necessary if you want to become a registered dietitian to have a master's in nutrition and not just a bachelor's. Now, if you are already a dietitian by having a bachelor's degree, you're fine. But if you are an up-and-coming dietitian, at that point, 2024, you will actually be required to get a master's degree, not just a bachelor's degree. The other requirement for being a dietitian is, as I mentioned, this 1-year dietetic internship. And there are a couple ways to do that. So I actually was in what is called a coordinated program. So the program actually provided my internship for me, and they kind of worked hand in hand. For a lot of people, their degree program, you get your degree, but you don't get an internship, and you have to apply separately for the internship and go through that year-long internship. And then after that year's internship, you are eligible to sit for the registered dietitian exam. And it is a long exam. It takes about 4 hours, and you sit for it and you finish it and you pass it, and you're relieved because you never have to do it again as long as you maintain your status as registered dietitian, which does require a few things like paying an annual fee. You have to pay an annual fee for your credential. I also pay an annual fee for membership to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which most dietitians in the United States are a part of. And then I live in the state of Illinois, and you do also have to have a license to practice dietetics in Illinois. So you pay an annual fee for your license as well. Licensure, and I probably could do a whole video on this, is different in every state. So not every state requires a license to be a dietitian or nutritionist. It actually is beneficial generally for dietitians and nutritionists to have licensure. It protects both clients and it protects practitioners because it creates a scope of practice so that within your scope of practice you are allowed to do certain things, and really no one else is allowed to do those things, but there are things that you aren't allowed to do as well. So if you are living in a state where dietitians are licensed, then clients know that you have to meet certain standards to hold that license. Now, in some states, Illinois being one of them, there are alternate paths to licensure, which is something that I looked into when I was looking into this whole process. So the main way would be to go to school, do your internship, take the test, become a dietitian, and then you get licensed. The alternate path is that there is another accreditation, which is called a certified nutrition specialist, in which you can also become licensed as a dietitian nutritionist. However, you are not a registered dietitian, you are just licensed to practice nutrition in your state. So although you may be able to get a job as a nutritionist, you probably won't be able to get a job as a dietitian because you are not a dietitian. So that is sort of, in long terms, the distinction between dietitian and nutritionist. Nutritionist can give advice on nutrition. A dietitian has a scientific background in nutrition science and is able to provide medical nutrition therapy and take positions as a registered dietitian. Oftentimes these positions are in hospitals, so registered dietitians in hospitals are making sure that patients' nutritional status is kept up while they are there. There are a lot of other ways in which a dietitian is able to work. A nutritionist, they may be more limited to things like individual counseling or maybe sports nutrition, things like that. Some community nutrition positions can be held by a nutritionist that does not need to be a dietitian. Ooh, so that's a bunch. One of the reasons I wanted to go into nutrition was because I was just really interested in nutrition on a personal level, and I really wanted to understand more, partly just so that I could improve my own nutrition. You are not going to learn the magic secret to nutrition by going to school to study nutrition. There aren't really any magic secrets. There's nothing that we're like keeping hidden from you. It's not like a secret society that has magic words and we're gonna tell you the one key to living a longer, healthier life or anything like that. The advice ends up being pretty straightforward at the end of the day. Things like variety and moderation. You're not gonna learn any magic secrets, but what you are gonna learn is a lot about the science of nutrition. Yes, nutrition is a science. It actually isn't that old of a science. People have only really been studying nutrition as a science for maybe the past 100 years or so. So a lot is still being learned and studied. A lot is being learned and studied very slowly, to be honest. Scientific inquiry can be a really slow process. Research strategies and finding funding to research new topics in nutrition. And then the process of testing and learning about things can be really long and arduous. Nutrition science is still a growing science. We don't know everything about it yet. Usually the steps are very small, they're incremental, but gradually we're getting to know more and more about how foods function in our bodies and how they affect our health. So if you're looking for the magic secret to nutrition, you're not going to find it through a nutrition program, but you're also not going to find it on the internet, because a lot of what is floating out on the internet is hype. So I decided to go to a science-based program because I wanted to be able to steer clear of hype and really look at the nuts and bolts of what nutrition is, to learn about metabolism and all of this stuff that happens in the body and how it actually works, not just worked for one person, right? So learning about how foods actually interact when you put them in the body. If that's boring to you, if you're not super interested in science, if you don't like math or you're not good at math, following a nutrition pathway may be a struggle. Another thing that I did prior to applying for programs, prior to even taking prerequisites, was I talked to other dietitians to see what they were doing in the world, to see if my goals aligned with some of the career options that were out there. So I encourage you to do that. Reach out to people in your area, even if you don't know them. I would say that a lot of people love talking to other people about their careers. See if there's a dietitian that you would be able to, buy a cup of coffee and just sit down and chat with them about what it is that they're doing, about their experience, to learn a little bit more about whether or not it's something that interests you. It's something that I did, and I absolutely don't regret it because it gave me a lot of information. You've decided, hey, you know what? I want to go ahead and become a dietitian. I want to look for a nutrition program. One of the best ways to do that is to go to eatright.org, which is actually the website for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And if you go to Eat Right Pro, I think you should be able to go to that site even though you are not a member. You can scroll down to the bottom of the page and look for things like Ascend, which will tell you about accreditation, because you're going to need to go to an accredited nutrition program. So not any school that just offers a nutrition class is going to be accredited and lead you to the point where you're going to be able to sit for the exam. You really do need to find a program that is accredited with the Academy. So you can do a search for that, and I think that's what I did in the first place, is I searched for programs in my state, in my area, and I ended up finding a program at the University of Illinois Chicago, which isn't too far from where I live, and it did happen to be a coordinated program, which at the end of the day made it easier for me to be able to have an internship, because if you go to a program that doesn't provide you with an internship, you apply for and get accepted to an internship program, but those can be really competitive and hard to get into. A lot of the programs in nutrition are also competitive and challenging to get into. You do need to have a bunch of prerequisites met. So, my undergrad degree was in the arts. I had not taken any more than the mandatory number of science courses and the mandatory number of math courses. So I had to take a bunch of prerequisites before I could even apply for my master's program. Things like chemistry, biology, anatomy and physiology, biochemistry, organic chemistry. And if all of that sounds like a drag to you, start slow. The first class I took was a chemistry class just to sort of test the waters and see how it was. It's a lot of math. I had to work pretty hard at it, but I did really well. And that to me was, encouragement to move forward. I also wasn't in school anymore, so finding courses that I could just take as prerequisites was a lot easier when I looked to the community colleges. Now, community colleges have kind of mixed reputations depending on your area. A lot of people go to community colleges instead of going to four-year programs, although there are also a lot of people who are going there to meet specific prerequisites so that they can move on to another program. But because there's such a mix of students, sometimes their reputation is that it's easy to get a good grade. First of all, it's not easy to get a good grade, but the professors might be a little bit more lenient. I will say some of the professors are still excellent on the community college level. I had a couple that were better than the ones I had in my graduate program, to be perfectly honest. So I don't think turn away from community college because you don't think the quality is going to be there. But if you're going to go that route, you really need to do well. Competitive programs mean that you need to have some stellar grades as you're applying so that those show up on your transcript, so that the people who are looking over your stuff, you want to stand out. So I got A's in all of my prerequisites, and I felt like I had to. I definitely know people who dropped out midway through courses because they knew they weren't going to get an A in the course, and then they took it again later. So it is something that does carry weight, your grades for prerequisites, because people are going to look at that when you're applying for programs. There were some other prerequisites as well, and depending on the program you're going to, you're going to want to look at what your specific prerequisites are. Some things like I had to have taken like a speech course and like sociology, and a lot of those I had actually done in my undergrad, so I was able to get those prerequisites, but some of the science prerequisites had to be met within the past 5 years. So I got all of my prerequisites done. It took me probably about 1.5 years as I was doing those part-time. And then I applied for the program. I also had to take the GRE because I was applying as a master's student. So that's the, the graduate, I don't know. Anyway, I had to take the GRE, which was a lot of fun, and I had to study for that as well. And then once I was accepted, I had some prerequisites to finish up that were mandatory that I finished before the actual program started. And then my program lasted about 2.5 years full time. So it is a significant commitment to decide to go ahead and become a dietitian. However, there are a lot of really rewarding careers out there, and having gone through a program, a master's program that was science-based, I know that I actually truly am an expert in the field. That doesn't mean I know everything because, as I said, things are still being learned. Just because I learned about how to treat all sorts of different disease states with medical nutrition therapy, it doesn't mean that I remember everything off the top of my head. So every once in a while, I still have to go back and review things. The other way to ultimately learn is to get experience as a dietitian. But part of being a dietitian also means that to stay a dietitian, you have to be consistent about ongoing learning. So there are continuing education credits that you're required to meet every 5 years really, but it's a lot of them every 5 years. So you kind of need to do it on an annual basis to make sure that you're keeping up with that. So the learning continues even after you have your degree, even after you have your credential, and even after you get a job as a dietitian. If you have any questions about this, do let me know. And I do plan to do a little series on becoming a dietitian. So the next thing I want to talk about is my dietetic internship. I'm also going to talk about studying for the dietetics exam. And if there's anything else that you're interested in knowing, let me know. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it interesting. And I hope you'll watch some of my other videos as well. So my main joy is to create healthy home cooking videos to inspire people to eat healthier at home. But I also want to inform people about just the world of dietetics as a whole. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a great one. And I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Bye-bye.